Well, schools want to know the best way to care for their students, especially when it comes to the difficult issue of gender identity, children wanting to change their sex. And at the moment, schools are being pressured by groups such as InsideOut and RainbowYouth, which is endorsed by the Ministry of Education. But there's a new resource for schools entitled Students and Social Transition, a Gender Identity Policy Guide for New Zealand Schools, and it's from the Ethos Alliance. Let's find out more about the policy, but also you may want to know more about the Ethos Alliance. So my special guest today is Alex Penk. He's the CEO of the Ethos Alliance. Alex was formerly with the Maxim Institute. Alex, tell us, firstly, many people may not have heard about the Ethos Alliance. What's that about?
Yeah, g'day, Bob. So Ethos is a charity that was set up last year to provide support around freedom of conscience and freedom of belief. And since we've been established, we've actually had questions from a number of parents and from school leaders who have been asking questions about the best way to care for students who are experiencing some kind of questioning around gender identity.
Right.
So that's what's led us to create the policy guide that we're here to talk about today.
Okay, and this is the policy guide. It looks very flash. Great presentation, covers a lot of issues. What is kind of the one-line point that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think the headline would really be that an approach which is known as watchful waiting is a legitimate and a legal policy option for schools when they want to care for students who are asking questions about social transition. Now, there's quite a lot packed into that one point, so maybe I'll try and sort of explain that a little bit more. Maybe if I start with some of the questions that we've been getting from parents and school leaders. They're often concerned that there are a number of resources which are already promoted to schools, which advocate for what's known as the immediate affirmation approach. So this is the kind of approach where children are said to be, the expert of their own gender identity. It results in schools having policies that say things like, "We will use the preferred pronouns of a student, full stop," without sort of asking about context. And so the approach that we're talking about is to say, well, we actually think there's quite a bit of evidence that suggests that's not actually in kids' best interests. And in fact, a better way to approach these questions is to stop and ask a holistic range of questions. For example, how old is the child who's asking these questions? And we've been approached by people from primary school through to secondary school kind of age. So you want to think about how old is the child? Do their parents know? And are they involved in this conversation? Is there a medical practitioner involved who's got relevant expertise? Has the child actually got a diagnosis of something like gender dysphoria or gender incongruence? Or do they have other mental health challenges that may also need support? So watchful waiting is about actually taking time to let the child develop and to explore all of these kind of issues so you can give the child holistic support instead of assuming that if there are questions being asked about gender identity, the answer must be affirmation.
Okay, now I noticed that you've got a section on the conversion therapy ban, and I mean, that's a new law which has had a chilling effect because in effect it says that, well, in my understanding is that you could be in trouble if you don't affirm a child and go down the social transition, the puberty blockers and the hormone therapy. If you do encourage them to wait, that's deemed conversion therapy and therefore it's illegal. So are your guidelines illegal?
I don't think they're illegal. And it's not just me, I should say. We've had these guidelines reviewed by senior legal and medical experts, including a King's Counsel. So we're really confident that they're accurate and that they're robust and that they're actually going to help schools and students achieve better outcomes. But just on the conversion practices point, it is an issue that people have a lot of questions about. It does tend to be at the front of people's minds when you're talking about this area. So we've covered that in quite a bit of detail in the guide. And really the key point here is that watchful waiting because it's about letting a child take time to develop and to naturally explore these kinds of questions. It's not about trying to change gender identity. It's not about trying to suppress gender identity. That kind of cautious and exploratory approach is not only becoming best practice in more countries like Sweden, Finland, England. That's not a conversion practice as defined by the law. If you want the detail on that, it's all in the guide, along with quite a lot of other legal analysis.
Okay, you also touch on relationships and sexuality education curriculum, which of course is a hot topic as well. You've touched on all the hot topics, and parents' concern is that the gender fluidity is in the curriculum, and even though it's a guideline, it still has the potential to be indoctrinated into very young children. So, are you calling for the withdrawal of RSE in schools?
We're not looking at issues to do with curriculum. We're looking at decisions that schools make in relation to students who are asking questions about social transition. And I should say we've focused on social transition because that's probably the most common scenario that schools are going to face. So that's where a student might want to do something like change their name or adopt different preferred pronouns, maybe wear uniform associated with the opposite sex, or use bathrooms that were designed for the opposite sex. Those are the kind of questions that we're considering. And on that, I think it is important that people know that the RSE guidelines are, what the name implies. They are guidelines. In places, they say what the law is, so they sound quite authoritative. But where they do that, it's the statement of the law that is binding, not what the guidelines say. And so when the guidelines promote things like the immediate affirmative approach to these kind of questions, that's actually an opinion. It's an advice. Schools are free to consider that advice, but they're also free to make up their own minds. And in fact, I think that the key thing for schools is they have a legal duty to care for all their students. They have to maintain and protect the safety of every student in their student body. So just sort of outsourcing their judgment like that is probably not a good idea. It is something that schools should be thinking through quite carefully and asking themselves, what do we think is the best way to care for children in general, and experiencing these kinds of questions as well. And that's really what the front end of our guide is about. How do you care for children well in this situation? And then looking at the legal framework to say, here are the things schools need to be considering as they think about the prospect of a watchful waiting policy. And if schools are interested in finding out more about a watchful waiting policy, we're very happy to talk to them directly. We've got a draft policy, and we can talk to them about whether that meets their needs. And help them adapt that to their own circumstances.
Okay, and just before I let you go, there's a section for teachers, because I know that there's teachers who are concerned. In fact, we did some polling around that, concerns about teachers possibly losing their license because they're not using preferred pronouns, not buying into the ideology. What's your legal advice around that?
Well, quick caveat, the guideline's not legal advice. I'm not giving legal advice right now. Probably the quickest thing to say on this, if you have a look at the guideline, is that we've discussed these issues. We've discussed the codes and the standards that apply to teachers. And we think, first of all, that watchful waiting is consistent with those obligations on teachers. I know that there was quite a lot of attention paid to a case that came out last year where a teacher, the headline reporting was that a Christian teacher had been suspended, had his registration cancelled because he didn't want to use the pronouns of a particular student. I think when you read the actual decision, there's quite a lot going on beneath the surface of those headlines. Every case will depend on its facts. But I think things for teachers to maybe be thinking about. Obviously, it's really important to be asking yourself, what is the best way to care for any child who's in my classroom? and to be approaching those kinds of conversations with respect, with compassion, and with wisdom as well. And I hope that certainly on the legal and the policy side, our guide will contribute to teachers and to schools being able to do that. Of course, that's part of a larger conversation that schools are going to have to consider as well. But as I say, we're very happy on that part of the conversation, the legal and the policy side, to support schools as they work through that.
Okay, I mean, I've read it. I think it's a absolutely fantastic resource. We've tried to do similar things previously, and you've got it, reviewed by a KC. I notice you've got references from a few people who I have great respect and time for in this particular debate. I guess, and I this is probably practice for a hard interview from a skeptic, and but I'm on the side of this guideline because I know it's the best for children. But what's happening in schools? You've got school leadership, and they've got InsideOut, Rainbow Youth coming in with their guidelines. And look, I've read them, and I know that some of their guidelines are actually not legal, especially in the area of changing the name of a student without parental notification. And then you've got your guidelines coming in saying a much better option, which I think most parents, based on our polling, would support. So what's a school to do when they've got both of these ideas coming in, and they're trying to figure out what to do? Is the attempt by these policy guides to say, hey, there's a different way, and you're pushing back against kind of the tsunami of what they've been receiving over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing we want to do is empower schools, because they're asking these questions about caring for their students, and so we want to support them in that. But I've kind of touched on this before, but every school is going to have to consider this for themselves. They've got to make up their own minds about what they're going to do. So we hope that they'll consider our policy guide alongside these other resources that you've mentioned that are already out there, that are already advocating a different approach, and one which we think is not actually a helpful approach for children. I think it's also important to say that if a school has a particular issue to do with a particular child in their care, for example, it's really important they get good advice about that particular situation. Obviously, a guideline like this, all those other resources from other groups, they're talking about a general approach. When you come to engage with actual individuals, including children who may be suffering distress, or where there are risks of things like social contagion, or there are privacy issues, and in terms of parents being involved or not involved, it's really important to get specific advice for that situation from professionals, whether that means getting medical practitioners involved, whether that's covering off the legal side of things, and certainly to the extent that we can. As I say, we're set up as a charity. We work with a network of expert lawyers. We want to be a resource for schools as they grapple with this, to help them deal with not just the policy framework, but these individual situations well, so that it's done in everybody's best interests.
Yeah, and I think I want to emphasize that because I did hear one of your media interviews, and they referred to you at the end as a think tank. This policy guide might be kind of what you'd expect from a think tank, but in fact you're offering far more than that, aren't you? Because if I understand it correctly, you're actually offering legal advice for schools, for teachers, for individuals who get into sticky situations in this area, aren't you?
We're offering, I would say, advice, advocacy, and education. So maybe one thing I should be clear about is that as a charity, we're not a law firm. I'm legally trained. I used to be a lawyer. I gave that up a number of years ago. So we don't offer legal advice per se. What we do is we provide general advice, but with a guideline like this, what we're wanting to do is kind of create like an opening, I guess, for people to come to us and get more specific advice, but also so if they need particular legal advice from from a current lawyer, we have those people in our network, and we can help make sure that schools, teachers, parents get the support they need from within our network.
Yeah. Fantastic. Superb document. Congratulations on the work, Alex. Boy, we sure do need it, especially in the current environment. And how can people get hold of this guide if they want to make it known to their school, and even if they want to read it for themselves?
Easiest way is just through our website, which is ethosalliance.nz. You'll find it on the homepage and in the news section. It's freely available to all schools, to anyone who's interested. We just want to get it out there and help people try and make the best decisions that they can in these situations. And for the sake of the children, for the sake of the students, who we all care about.
Yeah, exactly. I'll put a link in the explainer for this McBLOG. Alex, good to catch up, and keep up the great work.
Thanks so much, Bob.